This podcast is for singers who have music in their soul and want to be in the spotlight. We are Invicta Vox Radio.
Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Invicta Vox Radio, where, as always, we are your hosts, Mike and
Angie Lee.
And today we're actually going to be talking about something that we just recently talked about in our songwriting class. And
yeah, it's a really important mindset to have when you're approaching anything that you're creating, especially songwriting.
Yeah, and that is, it takes complete reps, right? Mm-hmm. So we always talk about, hey, it takes repetitions to get better at something. Like if you're going to get better at singing, you have to get in the habit of practicing your exercises, practicing your songs, working on those vowels, working on that airflow, and all these things take just reps, right? It takes practice. It takes doing it over and over and over again until you build up the muscle memory to where it just becomes natural and you don't even have to think about it when you're up on stage. And the same applies to songwriting, right? Like we told our songwriting class, for some reason, it's real weird when it comes to art, how people think, oh, I'm either good at it or I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's not viewed as a skill for whatever reason. It's either like, oh, my mind is just artistic.
I was born with it.
Yeah. Or I'm just not an artist. I guess I'm just a rock that can't think. I don't know. It's very weird in that way. And so,
but really what we talk about is songwriting is a skill. It's nice if, I feel like where people are natural at it is they allow their message and their vibe to flow through them, which is like your subconscious helping you create and to create music. And to an extent, that is easier for some people more than it is for others. And so there's a whole way that we can go about unlocking that and allowing that music to flow through you. But the art of building a song, especially in contemporary music, that could be considered a hit song, and the formula for that, and really getting your message to come through and the vibe you want to come through, the emotion to come through, while it's staying within the rules of that formula, that's a skill. That songwriting is a skill, and it's something that can definitely be developed. And so the whole idea of complete reps is a really important thing to consider when you're writing a song, because a lot of people will go into writing a song, and especially when they come into our classes and we're pushing, okay, write as much as you possibly can. And what we see often happens is people get into the rut of writing like a verse and a chorus, and then they're done. And they either get stuck, or they just aren't feeling the song anymore, or they want to start something different. And so they write that verse and chorus and they don't complete the song. They get hung up on the second verse. They get hung up on the bridge. Maybe they write the whole song except for the chorus, and they're just really struggling to complete the song. But then what happens is they get into the habit of never finishing. They always are just doing part reps. They're getting reps in, but they're not completing those reps. And so their brain actually gets into the position of, oh, when I go to write a song, I only write a verse and a chorus. And they get into the habit of only being able to do that instead of seeing the song from start to finish. And that's what we're talking about, is that if you can't get in those complete reps, then you're going to kind of dig yourself into a rut of never finishing anything.
Yeah, and I think it becomes even easier to go from verse, chorus, or even start to write a verse and be like, that's not good enough, and then chuck it.
Yeah, there's that perspective
right? Like,
too.
Oh, this chorus isn't good enough, chuck it. And really all it does is, again, we've talked about this in past episodes, when you leave yourself an out, then you'll never progress. And so I think that that's part of the problem too, is you give yourself an out where you can completely shut down, or not allow yourself to just open up and get through it and progress. But the other issue is, it's like in sports, right? If you were only, let's say you're a football player and you're going to do your drills. If you're only doing one of those drills over and over again, like you're just trying to get off the line really fast, right?
And that's all you do.
Which that's valuable, but if you don't know how to connect the pieces after that, then yeah, you could be super good at this first little piece of it. But if you haven't learned to connect all the other aspects of it, then really you're selling yourself short, and you're not going to be able to perform the best you could. And the same applies with songwriting. Like if you've only worked like a verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, and you're just doing that over and over again, well, you haven't learned to build the dynamics that are involved between going from chorus back into verse number 2, into a second chorus, into a bridge, into a chorus, and intros and outros, and how to play with all that. and let it flow, and how to make it build and, calm down, and all the different dynamics that play into it, and also all the different cool things that you can do from one chorus to another or one verse to another, and little dynamic shifts that you can make in it. And yeah, maybe it wasn't interesting to begin with, but once you go through and you kind of play with it and tweak it and complete the actual song, now you've developing the skill on a whole nother level, and it gets you to see things that you wouldn't otherwise see.
Right. And we're not completing, like, everything that you complete isn't necessarily something you're going to use either.
Right.
It's the skill of figuring out how to complete it. Right. And so even if you start writing something that's maybe you're not totally in love with at first, but you're like, I'm just going to trust the process and, work through this thing. Even if you end up not using it, that's totally still a valuable rep that you just got in to be able to say, oh, I really liked what I did with this. And in hindsight, when I look back at how I wrote the song, this worked, this didn't. Okay, now I've learned and I've grown from this experience, and now I'm going to apply what I've learned to the next one. And so, again, that's another lesson you learn from having a complete rep, is where you went wrong and being able to course correct, because hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah, and I think that's super true, right? It's that analytical component of actually going back and looking at things and saying, okay, yeah, this went well and this didn't. Mm-hmm. But here's something that I've heard a lot of songwriters do. And
because you don't want to be analytical in the process of writing, but it's important to go back after.
Right, yes, anyway. After you're done. Because if you do it in the moment, then you'll shut down, right? And you'll kind of get analysis paralysis, and it leads to this isn't good enough, and you chuck it before you're done. But it's important to go back afterwards and make tweaks and play around with it a little bit and see what you can change and see what went well and see what didn't go well. There's a trend that I've seen in songwriters. I've heard of a couple people doing this. I talked to a guy in LA who did this, and I've talked to some of our other artists who do this, or who have tried this, is to write a song every day. Yeah. And this guy wrote a song every day for like 2 years, this guy that I talked to in LA. And while I appreciate the effort and I appreciate the hustle.
And that's really good, because it does get you an amazing, insane amount of reps.
Yes. And you will progress. But the problem is you're not really giving yourself the time to be able to go back and look at things. It's like, okay, I'm done. Now on to the next. Now on to the next. And you never give yourself time to go back and be like, okay, what went well there? That's why a lot of times when, again, I always bring it back to like physical, because physical is so easy to see, right? Like if you're working on something physical, it's best to be able to with your body. So like your lifting technique, I'm starting to get back into like rock climbing and really looking at that. And so one of the best ways to do it is to film yourself and then go back and look at it and go, okay, this is where my technique's breaking down. Like, oh, when I was rock climbing, when I'm in the rock climbing gym, I missed this hold, or I did this move really weird. And so that's what caused me to fall, right? And so the same thing is true in art. Again, just because it's art doesn't mean that you shouldn't go back and try and learn and become better. It doesn't mean that it either flows forth perfectly or not at all.
Most
it's
of the
a
time
silly
it doesn't
notion.
flow forth perfectly.
Right. And so
there's those things that they do happen every once in a while. You sit down to write and the song it completes itself in a half hour to an hour, and you're like, oh, and then you don't have to do anything with it because it just happened. But you don't get to that point unless you've actually gotten a bunch of reps before that. So your mind and your body and your voice and everything about it already knows what to do, and it just kind of creates. And those reps are what is going to teach your body and your mind what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And that's why in the creation process, when you're first like sitting down to do it, yes, let it flow freely, but let it just roll, right? And then afterwards come back and tweak it. But don't just push on and push on and push on and keep making the same mistakes over and over again. It's like a lot of people say nowadays, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect, right? Because practice makes permanent. And if you're making the same crappy mistakes over and over and over again without actually giving yourself a chance to learn and improve, then you're just going to embed or ingrain those crappy patterns.
Right. You have to evaluate yourself. And it goes back to that guy you talked about who had written like 200 songs or something like that. Or no, 2 years straight. He'd written 2 years straight every single day. And you asked him, you were like, so a lot of those songs were probably ones you kind of tossed though, right? Like you wouldn't have used all of them.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the way I said it wasn't the best way, because I was like, yeah, a lot of them are probably mediocre, right? Which is true.
I would expect that. If you're writing that many songs over and over again. And he's like, no, they're all good. That's the problem. That's how you know that he actually didn't go back and listen to them, because he didn't go, yeah, some of them are really great. Some of them are kind of not. And then a lot of them are kind of in that middle ground. And he didn't, it's like he hadn't even thought of it before when you talked to him about it. And so that's why if you are going to write a song a day, which I think that's great, especially if you're not a super experienced songwriter and you're just trying to get reps in, do that. But save yourself some time to really evaluate the songs you're writing and to really sit with them, and maybe do it once a week or something, where you have some time carved out to go back and look at what's working and what's not working in your music, so that you can course correct and make it better, so that as you're getting all of those reps, rep, you're actually building the skill instead of, like you said, practice makes permanent. You're not practicing this mediocre skill set. You're actually practicing and getting better. And that course correction is the best way we can possibly do that. One other point I wanted to bring to this, because we were talking about complete reps. A lot of times, like we were saying, people will write like a verse and a chorus, and then they won't write anything else, or they'll write parts of the song. The other place we see people get stuck, because when it comes to songwriters, I like to break them into 3 categories. Whenever they come into our classes, people tend to be either really strong lyricists, melody writers, or composers in writing the music. And when you're starting your journey as a songwriter, you'll start with one of those being the strongest for you. Those are the three components we bring together with skill sets in songwriting. And so a lot of people will, be like, yeah, I wrote a whole song and here's the lyrics. And that's like a complete rep in regards to all the lyrics are done in the song, but then they can't write the melody, or they don't know enough chords on their instrument to start to write music for it, or they don't play an instrument at all. And so it's really important for you to understand that you don't have to be the best at all of those things, but to be a complete songwriter and to bring all of those skills to the table and be able to grow as much as possible. It's really important for you to consider that you need to have the trifecta, right? You need to be a lyric writer, a melody writer. So you have to actually understand how to craft melodies with your voice, whether you're going to be singing them or you're writing them for someone else. You still have to understand how to craft melodies for the voice. And then also, how do you compose underneath that? And so if you're missing one of those elements, that's another thing to consider too. And this is why we talk about songwriting being a skill. People are like, oh no, it's something you're born with. No, it's not. It's a skill. And you can see as we're peeling this open, it's a skill set of many skills.
Right. It's very complex.
It's very complex to be able to do it. And so whenever I have someone come into the studio for the first time, they're like, yeah, I really want to write songs. And I said, well, do you write songs yet? Oh, I just have my poetry book. And I'm like, great. You have one of the 3, right? You're already writing lyrics. So it's just a matter of opening your mind to, okay, where are my reps incomplete? Where am I not doing everything I can be doing to really be able to create this full end product, so that then I can look back and see where the holes are, and then develop my skills further, or work on crafting my songs in a specific way so that I can course correct and continue to grow in those reps and continue to get that practice for permanence, right? In the way that I want. And so that's what we're looking at doing, and that's what it means to get a complete rep.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think a lot of people beat themselves up very early in the process.
Yeah, way too much.
Oh, I'm not good at this.
Their expectations are so high. And I just laid out some of the skills you have to have. We're not even talking about breaking down songs to the point of like, what's your hooks and your rhythms and your energetic journey and like all these other things that you haven't even thought about yet. We're just talking about overarching skills, and you can see that there's a ton.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's just funny.
It takes years.
It makes me laugh in the sense of almost like a you'll be okay kind of way when we have people that we're coaching and they're like, oh, I'm just not very good. Well, how long have you been doing it? Oh, I've done it a little bit over the past 2-3 months. And it's like, okay, how many songs have you written? Well, I've written a couple partial ones and 2 full songs. Well, why would you expect yourself to be good?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I've swung a golf club 3 times. I've gone to the driving range 3
but
times.
for some reason, I can't hit a hole in one.
For some reason, I'm not ready to be on the pro circuit yet. It's like, yeah, no kidding.
Well,
like,
a lot of pros aren't even ready to be on the pro circuit yet. That's what's so crazy about it. It's like, it's years of development, just like any athlete.
Yeah. So,
you know, it's not something that you just walk into. And you always hear those stories of people that just miraculously get famous. And not very often is that the case. They've already put in years and years and years and years of work underneath it. They just don't tell you about it. But every once in a while, there is a freak that does that. And that's or a freak situation, not a freak person, but a freak situation where that does happen. And
well, it takes a freak person to be able to make that happen too.
Incredible.
That's like a once in a generation.
Yeah, that's not how it plays, guys. That's not how it goes. And so give yourself the grace of understanding that it's a journey, and remember that like if you're farther in your journey, because you mentioned like the beginner that has the high expectations of all of this being the ability that they're supposed to have after 3 months. But I know artists who've been doing this for a decade and they still haven't cracked the code. And it's largely in part because they've become uncoachable because they have so many reps that they're not willing to look at what they're doing to make it better. Or they just don't understand the idea of course correcting. And like you said, getting that complete rep and then looking back and how they can really tweak things to make it stronger and better. Or they're not leaning into the people around them. Or they are leaning into the people around them and those people just happen to not really know anything about music. So it happens at every level of where you're at in your journey. And so it's always a question of, are we getting complete reps? Are we getting complete reps in every area of this skill set that we're building? And then are we open and willing to look back at what we've created and go yes and no, working, not working? Are we willing to be coachable so that we can allow someone who does know something about music, not people who don't, but to sit down and actually walk through the songs with us and say, this is working and this is not working, and get opinions about what we're doing. And that's going to give you such a huge leg up, because then it's going to allow you to know if you should be in the studio with that song or not. If you're hitting something super beautifully and hot and you're like, okay, I got to keep working on creating stuff like this. So it just helps you narrow your focus and get more done and be more efficient.
Yeah.
And more skilled.
Yeah, and just be patient with yourself throughout the journey. Because remember, it's a journey and it takes time. Anything that you're going to do in life, it takes time to get good at.
And it's ever evolving. That's the other issue and difficulty is music evolves and people evolve.
Yeah, there's always another level. So just always keep that in mind. And with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode.
Yeah.
So question of the day is, where are you cutting your reps short, right? Like, where are you practicing or trying to develop and work on something, but you're actually cutting your reps short? Where are you halfway doing it instead of fully working through it, giving yourself an opportunity to learn, just like we talked about in our last podcast?
And to go all in.
Yeah.
We use the example of songwriting in this episode, but it really applies to anything that you're trying to develop, whether it's your art or your body or anything like that. What is it?
So make sure you bust open your journal, get your pen, jump on the comment section, however you want to do it, but answer that question. We ask you these questions so that way you can actually just start to think about what you're doing in a little bit different way. And yeah, thinking about it will give you one response or make you think about it a little more, but actually taking the time to really write out an answer.
Declare it.
And declare it. One, it gives it to, you're declaring it to other people, but two, anytime that you give yourself a chance to write something down, it just makes you think about it on a deeper level.
Yeah, it ingrains it into your soul.
Into your soul. All right, everybody. And with that, as
like
always,
it, subscribe it.
Like it, subscribe.
Share it.
Yeah.
Tell a friend.
Yeah.
Be a friend.
Shoot a firework into the sky.
Flares. Red flares.
And just let them know. But whatever you guys could do to help us grow the show would be greatly appreciated. And until next time.
Peace.